Historians have argued about this for more than a century, and the strongest claim isn't the one you've heard before. The hamburger did not arrive in one single moment. It grew slowly across several decades of American food history. Its earliest ancestor was the Hamburg steak, a seasoned patty of minced beef served in a busy German port city. German immigrants carried that recipe across the Atlantic during massive waves of migration in the 1800s. By the 1870s, Hamburg steak sat on dinner plates in cities with large German immigrant communities. Diners sitting at that table ate it slowly, using a knife and fork, exactly how a European chef would serve it. Nobody at that table imagined this seasoned beef patty would someday be sandwiched between two slices of bread.
The missing piece was never the meat itself. It was the idea of turning a plated meal into portable street food.
That single shift, meat placed between bread, is exactly where four competing American stories begin to diverge. Picture a dock worker in the port city of Hamburg, eating a seasoned beef patty right off a hot iron cooking griddle. Sailors crossing the Atlantic Ocean carried that same taste with them into crowded, noisy American port cities.
Immigrant cooks in those cities adapted the recipe, swapping in local beef and unfamiliar regional seasonings.
Meanwhile, county fairs across the Midwest filled with vendors shouting prices over crowds of hungry visitors. Thousands of fairgoers wandered those fairgrounds, wanting food they could eat while moving between attractions. A plated Hamburg steak, cut with silverware at a table, simply could not survive that fast-moving environment. What those vendors truly needed was something a customer could grip in one hand while walking through a busy crowd. That practical demand for portable food set the exact stage for the hamburger's long disputed and contested birth.
Seymour, Wisconsin insists its own county fair hosted the single decisive moment behind this whole transformation.
Picture a 15-year-old boy pushing a small cart, selling loose meatballs to fairgoers in 1885. Customers kept complaining. Walking and eating meatballs at once was messy, and juice dripped down their hands. So the boy flattened his loose meatballs into patties and pressed them between two slices of plain, ordinary bread.
Suddenly, fairgoers could eat comfortably with one free hand while wandering through the busy fairground crowd.
Seymour still throws an annual festival built entirely around that teenage vendor and his flattened meatball sandwich.
A historical marker in town calls that 1885 fair the true birthplace of the modern-day hamburger.
That would settle the mystery, except a Texas town claims an older sandwich with a much bigger stage behind it.
Athens, Texas points not to a fairground, but to a small lunch counter located near the local courthouse square.
There, a local vendor served ground beef patties between bread slices years before Seymour's fair even happened. Athens historians argue this practice predates Seymour by several years, though full written records remain incomplete.
Their strongest card is a much bigger stage, the 1904 World's Fair held in St. Louis, Missouri that year.
That same Athens vendor packed up his small stand and traveled to sell his sandwich to fairgoers in St. Louis.
A newspaper reporter covering that fair described the sandwich in print, introducing the word to readers nationwide.
Suddenly, Athens had something Seymour never got: national press coverage from one of the country's biggest events. Two small towns, separated by hundreds of miles, both now stood on solid, competing pieces of historical ground. But a third rival was about to argue that both towns had missed the sandwich's actual naming moment completely.
Hamburg, New York ties its own claim to the Erie County Fair, held that same year back in 1885.
Picture two brothers running a food stand there, suddenly realizing their entire pork supply had run completely out. Scrambling for a quick fix, the brothers grabbed ground beef instead and served it between two slices of bread. Fairgoers asked what to call this improvised sandwich,
and the brothers simply named it after their own hometown.
That single detail matters more than any other claim. It directly explains why the word hamburger exists at all.
Unlike Seymour or Athens, this particular story answers a question neither of those two towns can fully explain. A historical marker in Hamburg, New York, now commemorates that improvised 1885 moment at the fair. Yet skeptics note this story, like Seymour's, survives only through family memory, not a single written record.
If you're enjoying untangling this rivalry as much as I am, subscribe. There's a lot more history like this coming.
3 towns, 3 separate fairground stories, and still no written proof strong enough to settle this argument.
Then New Haven, Connecticut offers something completely different. A restaurant still open since 1885.
Picture a hurried customer rushing through the door, asking for a meal he could eat on his way to catch a train.
The owner grabbed a broiled beef patty, pressed it firmly between 2 slices of toast, and handed it right over.
That restaurant, Louis Lunch, still serves hamburgers today using a recipe that has barely changed in a century. No fairground story can compete with an actual building you can walk into and taste that same sandwich right now. The Library of Congress has even recognized Louis' Lunch as a notable site tied directly to hamburger history. That recognition gives New Haven institutional weight that none of the fairground stories ever managed to earn.
But surviving for over a century only proves longevity, not proof that the sandwich actually began there first. Line these 4 competing stories up side by side, and the real underlying problem becomes obvious immediately. Seymour and Hamburg, New York both rest entirely on fairground stories passed down through family memory alone. Athens holds a documented appearance at a massive national event, but its earlier local claim stays unverified.
New Haven offers a living restaurant, yet even that founding story depends on that same kind of family memory. Historians searching for hard proof find newspaper archives, ledgers, and government records frustratingly inconsistent.
Almost no 1880s newspaper thought a fairground food vendor was worth writing down for later history.
Written records from that era simply never prioritized documenting casual, working-class street food inventions.
That gap between spoken family memory and surviving written paper is exactly why no single claim can ever be proven.
So before we go any further, which of these 4 cities would you personally believe the most right now, honestly?
Whoever actually served it first, the hamburger's real rise depended on forces far bigger than any single town.
World's fairs introduced this sandwich to millions of visitors who had never tasted anything quite like it before. The 1904 St. Louis Fair alone drew nearly 20 million visitors across its several-month-long run. Once automobiles became common in the 1920s, roadside diners began serving hamburgers to passing drivers. Those diners needed food that was fast, cheap, and simple enough to prepare for a constant stream of travelers. The hamburger fit perfectly, requiring almost no equipment while delivering fast, dependable results every single time. Chain restaurants built entirely around the hamburger started spreading across the country by the 1920s. Mass culture, not any single inventor, is what turned a disputed local sandwich into a nationwide, everyday staple. If mass culture spread the burger everywhere, why do these 4 small towns still refuse to drop their old claim? Each city built its own identity around this story, hosting annual festivals that draw thousands of visitors yearly. Seymour's Summer Festival features a hamburger-themed parade and the ceremonial grilling of one enormous burger patty. Hamburg, New York holds community events every single summer tied directly to its Erie County Fair origin story.
Athens keeps a historical marker standing tall, proud of its link to the massive St. Louis World's Fair event.
New Haven residents treat Louis Lunch as a genuine point of civic pride, unlike any ordinary chain restaurant. These claims generated tourism dollars, media attention, and local pride that outweighs plain historical certainty.
Letting go of that pride would cost these towns something they clearly value more than winning a factual argument.
No single city can honestly be crowned the undisputed inventor, and that conclusion is itself the real answer. The hamburger never began as one invention. It evolved from the German Hamburg steak through several innovations.
Seymour, Wisconsin represents the moment a fairground vendor made ground meat portable between two slices of bread. Athens, Texas represents the moment that sandwich reached a national stage through the St. Louis World's Fair.
Hamburg, New York represents the very story that actually explains why the sandwich carries that exact name today.
New Haven, Connecticut represents the longest surviving physical link between the sandwich and its disputed past.
Each of these four claims preserves one real piece of the hamburger's slow transformation into an American icon. That's why all four towns still claim credit today. Each one preserved a genuine piece of the same true story.
The hamburger belongs to Seymour, Athens, Hamburg, and New Haven at once, so tell me, which claim convinced you most?